All right, so all I can say is I couldn't get anywhere without great people like Jacob and Chris Anderson and I'll even say Sam Bushman and Zach Gillisa back there. Been fantastic individuals in helping me get to where I am now. So Send Me, like he was saying, is about the men. Now we can't get anywhere because all the mama bears and all the women who are truly involved in the fight for freedom. We grow because of their willingness to get the men into the fight. And everyone's probably very aware that there's a prophecy about the nation will be in ruin and the Constitution hangs by a thread. And then it says that the elders of Israel, it didn't say Christians generally, it didn't say members of the church generally. It said the elders of Israel would be the staff the nation leans upon, right, to uphold the Constitution. And we believe strongly that time is drawing near. And the elders of Israel need to be prepared for that because the prophecy doesn't say it will happen. It says, if there was a big if in there. If the elders are ready for that. So we strive to empower the men to take back their courage and defend their faith, their family, and the Constitution. The problems I see in America come down to the absence of men. And so that's what we hope to do, is to revive that and to get them plugged into all the great organizations that already exist so that they are there to be involved civically. They are there to defend the family and our doctrine publicly, as well as in their own wards and branches. I say branch because I live in Kentucky and it's a branch of a handful of people, but that's all about Send Me.
Thank you. Liberty United. Most of you come to many of our events. We appreciate your support. Actually, just a quick thought. Especially as a single father, there's been several times I've been like, wow, this is labor intensive, and I wish I could give it up. But I take that back. Liberty United serves a niche that no other organization in Utah is doing. I am so grateful. I do not put down other organizations that are about civic action. We need action. But without principles and without knowledge, you're just going to run circles. You could put in a lot of work. Could you put in a lot of work, but just run circles if you don't have a map? So that roadmap is the principles. And so I have this video to share with you to remind us the importance of being a principled people, not just fighting evil. Because you could take a bite of a bad cookie that's burnt and nasty and go, blah, that's gross, that's a bad cookie. Does that mean you know how to bake good cookies? Does that automatically, just because you can recognize something's burnt, does that automatically mean you know how to bake yourself? No. It requires knowledge and practice with a recipe. The Constitution is a recipe for liberty.
What does the Lord say about liberty? A 17th century French philosopher said, "Divine grace and natural knowledge, far from diminishing my liberty, increase it and fortify it." John chapter 8, verse 32, "And thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Roger Williams preached of spiritual liberty clear back in the 1600s in both England and the Rhode Island colony.
And for those people who think they can just sit there or watch Sean Hannity and Fox News and that's enough, your children and grandchildren are going to be living in a virtual communist hell. We need to educate just like our founding fathers did. We will succeed with God's grace if we help ourselves.
Therefore, thus saith the Lord, ye have not hearkened unto me in proclaiming liberty, every one to his brother, and every man to his neighbor. Behold, I proclaim a liberty for you, saith the Lord. We need to fight for our liberty every day and support and defend the law of the Lord, the Constitution. To do that today, you can follow and get involved with Liberty United. Unite our community behind these principles. Follow us on Facebook at Liberty United and our website, unitingliberty.com.
Good morning. Grateful to Jake Oaks and for everyone being here who's a part of this. I do have a lot to say about liberty and the scriptures, and a lot of it has to do with experience in Iraq and Afghanistan. My theme today is not by might nor by power, liberty, covenant, and the constitutional militia. My question to you is, do you believe in God? Do you believe in his message, which is the gospel? Gospel means great news, and what is that great news? That we die and we live again. If you can remember that, then that'll put a lot of things in perspective. When you go to war, you don't know if you're coming back. So I'm going to give you some perspective. There's a repeating pattern in the scriptures about being righteous, and when things go wrong or south, when your liberties are taken, abused, or I guess just out there and no one wants to protect you. I'm going to give you a couple of stories within the scriptures in the Old Testament. And well, the first one has to do with Gideon. And you all know Gideon, you probably know the story. Gideon, he was told to lead an army. He said he didn't know if he wanted to do that or not. So what did he do? He put out a fleece, and outside in the wilderness, he said, God, if you really want me to do this, make the fleece wet, make the ground dry. Gideon said, God said, okay, you tested me. The next morning, the fleece was wet, the ground was dry. Gideon didn't take that for an answer, so he said, well, let's try something else. Let's make the ground wet and the fleece dry. So the next test, God did the same thing. The ground was wet and the fleece was dry. So Gideon got his answer, right? Next, Gideon is asked to lead an army of 32,000 against the Midianites, who were coming against Israel and taking their crops and stuff. When God told him to form this army, he cut that army down by, Gideon said, whoever wants to go home can go home. And 22,000 men left. So he was left with 10,000. After the 10,000, God said, well, that's too many. The other army is like bigger. They won't believe that it's God's might if it's just 10,000. That's too many, so let's cut it down to 300. So Gideon's like, oh, okay, 300, how are we going to do that? He says, go take your men by the river, let them slurp up the water, and the ones that slurp it up or lap it up, those are the ones you're going to pick. So Gideon does that, he picks the men, 300, and then later they defeat the Midianite army. And, well, there's a thing to that. He says something crazy like, hey, grab a horn or grab a trumpet, grab a jar, and the torch. We'll go out there by night and camp on the army, and we'll break the jars, sound the trumpet, and when the light lights up, this army that's asleep is going to wake up and think that they're being attacked by this bigger army. So that's what happens. This bigger army wakes up and they're confused, so they start killing each other and they start retreating. After that, Gideon was able to pursue and kill 2 more kings. So if you know that story, that's a great story. My daughter actually had a prayer. I'm going back a little bit about prayers being answered, and she's a dancer, right? So I was telling her about the story of Gideon and what he did, and so she has her dancing shoes, and I said, well, put your shoes outside and leave them there until the morning, and if they're wet, then you know God answered. And if they're not wet, he still answered. So there we go. You're gonna see some random pictures come up, and you're gonna know one thing is what I say is what I do. You can see some people being trained in weapons and fighting. These are the modern weapons, right? So it really doesn't matter the size of the army or the size of the person. When David went against Goliath, Goliath did not know, he didn't do his homework, and he didn't know that David used to slay bears and lions for his work. That was his job, to keep him away from his flock. So when he went up against Goliath, Goliath didn't know that. So Goliath was easy prey for David. He was prepared. Both Gideon and him were prepared. Same with the 2,000 stripling warriors, right? These were righteous young men who went and fought, and they all came back. Some were injured, but they all came back. So what's embedded in the Constitution is defense. Everything is defense. When you think about the scriptures, everything is defense. Gideon with his army, the 2,000 stripling warriors, David, in defense of their liberties, their religion, their families, everything. There's a scripture here that says, "This is what the Lord says, do not be afraid, don't be discouraged by this mighty army, for the battle is not yours but God's." The battle is always God's. Whether you're on this side of the veil or the other side of the veil, it makes no difference. If you die in Christ, right? We'll see each other again. If you know that, then if you die, it's on God's time. So if I go to war another time, I know it's on God's time. I can walk down the street and trip over a rock and I'm dead. Right? But it's in God's time. Years ago, there was an incident out here in Provo, and we had some members of United Citizens Alarm who stood up with police, with law enforcement, and kind of blocked away Black Lives Matter and all these different groups. I'll just go ahead and go. In Alma, it talks a little bit more about the stripling warriors, and what I wanted to emphasize on is that they were taught to defend themselves. So who do you think taught them? Mama bears, right? So and Papa bears, you guys got to take them out there and show them, right? You got to show them. You got to take your grandkids, your kids, and show them what they need to do. One of the things is that when Captain Moroni was leading his army and he made the title of Liberty, you know, what was the defense for? It's always been about his family, children, liberty. They were being taken away. The land was becoming wicked. Here's a big piece. They were fighting for their homes, their liberties, their family, their wives and their children. Wives and children in there. How do you measure how wicked the world is today? If you took the Book of Mormon and looked in this chapter in Mormon 3 and 4, which I'll talk about a little bit later, you're going to see that when wickedness is ripe, women and children get trafficked, raped, murdered, sacrificed. And if you don't know that that's happening today, then I'm here to put a fire under you so you can wake up. It's happening. You're reading about it. I don't know if you're reading about it in the right sources. Maybe you need to change your sources, but you need to know what's going on. So every state has a number. They have a published figure of how many women, children are kidnapped or missing. Why are they missing? That's a good question, right? They're missing because they can do it. They're getting away with it. In Utah alone right now, there's over 150 women and children missing. In the United States right now, the number is 25,500 and something. So look at the enemy. Look at what it lays around you. It's there. It's very obvious. But if you're clicking on Netflix, or if you're playing video games, if you're not in tune with what's going on around you, even if you're here locally, it's happening here in Utah. There's people trying to wake people up here in Utah, other than Jake Oaks. There's a group. This is an emotional picture. That was 23 years ago. That's my son. When I left, I didn't know if I was going to see him again because I was going to war. Because I was in Iraq. He's 26 now. But you know what? I had that same confidence that back then that I have now. That if I went to war again, this side or that side, God's plan, we are all gonna die, no matter when. Right now, I just want you to know who my son is. Can you please stand? Thank you. So I did it for him, but I also did it for the country, right? I love my son. I love everybody here. I didn't know if he was going to be here or not, but I'm glad he was here. So you can see, happy curly boy, still a happy boy. All right. So liberty is all used as a moral cause. We are the ones, we the people are the ones that create the laws, and we have legislators that are supposed to legislate what we want. It's not the other way around. Okay, if we don't like something, we have to address it, and we have to let them know what we want. If it's not right, if they're not being held accountable, we need to go after it and change it. Okay? So we have our rights, and it's the consent of the governed. We're being governed by those we put to govern us, right? So things are good. So I have a question for you. Yes, Congress has the power to call a militia. But what was first, the militia or the Constitution? Anybody? Yeah, the militia, right? First and Second Amendment. They were writing, well, the militia and these brave guys were out there making sure these guys didn't get killed, right? Get assassinated. The militias were out there. All right. Well, the militia is not a standing federal army, and just like irregulars during the times of George Washington, they were scattered abroad everywhere. And the Second Amendment right here says a well-regulated militia. That's the first thing they wrote. We need a militia to protect these rights and liberties. And soon that became into law enforcement and other things, right? Security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not ever be infringed. But states still, with their governors, want to infringe those rights. Here's a thing where it says, are militias legal? All right. Well, I would check with the state, make sure you're well aligned with law enforcement, and make sure that militia is doing the right thing, in righteousness. Okay. You can read some figures here. It says the Militia Act of 1903, it gives the authority to organize the National Guard and unorganized militias. States do not regulate militias. Again, another picture. That's me in the background. That's my son in the foreground. All right, for the Utah has the Constitution, Article 15, Utah Code 39-84-101, Utah State Defense Force. Have you ever heard of the State Defense Force? You probably haven't, because it's been inactive for 30 years. That's supposed to be the actual militia. We have the Utah National Guard too, but if the president takes over the National Guard, what's left? Yeah, so there you go. James Madison said it really clearly. Composed of the body of the people. We are the people, trained in arms. And it's one of the most natural defenses we can have, but it's the key word is trained, right? If you're not training, you're not prepared. The Lord, I'm going to say this, the Lord in the scriptures mentions fear not over 300 times. Fear not 300 times. And however, if you are prepared, you shall not fear, right? So that goes together. Oh wait, did I miss that one? Yeah, you guys read this one already, right? So regular training, local leadership, someone to make sure that no one's doing anything wrong, illegal, if you're within the militia, right? George Washington. What do you know about George Washington? Before George Washington commanded the Continental Army, he was fighting the French and Indian War. And he wanted to become a British officer. But I'll tell you what happened. During our Revolutionary War, he had to gather up the militias to help him fight with the army because they knew the area better. Like, who knows Utah better than Utahns? Some outsider or you? We do, right? Or some other area that maybe you've lived in. So he built a disciplined army and used them to harass the British wherever they were. The other thing is, like I said, he was in the French-Indian War. He wanted to be an officer, a British officer, but they said no, they didn't want him. So he failed at that. Not that he failed, they didn't want him. So what did Washington do? He learned when he was in that French-Indian War how the British fight. That was a lot of intelligence he gained, a lot of experience. So he was being prepared for this revolution, and at age 44, he was appointed as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Random picture, that's in Afghanistan. Again, James Madison wrote, the people themselves armed and disciplined. Disciplined righteously, right? We don't have some rogue guy thinking he's going to do something else that he shouldn't. So in this slide is very important, the second paragraph. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and the people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. So it's knowledge. Arm yourself with knowledge. Where are you getting your knowledge from? Are you still watching CNN, ABC, CBS, all those fake news? You get regurgitated the same thing every day, every hour. Blah, right? Where do you go? Go to different social media sites. Find out where this information is. Okay? General Flynn, my favorite general. This general, you know, he was the first to go down with the deep state. But also he's the one general who knows about counterinsurgency, which may happen here. I don't know. The scriptures and the Constitution are well balanced. And they talk about, and they both reject tyranny, a centralized coercive power, and militarism without moral authority. So when we lose our righteousness or we become prideful, some condemnation comes upon us. Here Mormon is leading the Nephite army, and he's praying, but his prayers don't seem to be answered. Why? Because he's lost, I don't know if he's lost faith, but he's seen carnage everywhere, and it's not good. It's nice to have good friends. In Mormon 3 and 4, you're going to see that the women, like I said, and children are sacrificed to idols. That's your temperature gauge. That's going on right now. It's happening. If you didn't know it, it's happening. And that's our temperature gauge. It is happening. What are you going to do about it today and tomorrow? Go train. So liberty is a covenant responsibility. It's preserved by righteousness, and it's prepared by disciplined citizens who trust in God, have faith, follow lawful orders, know the gospel. If you live, you shall live again. That's it. If you die, you're going to die. In summary, I just wanted to say, victory is determined by righteousness, covenant, and rule of law. And sometimes if you have good friends like General Flynn, you get to do them favors. And you know, even this guy walks around with security, but he's a general. Remember that your responsibility is to be prepared. Remember that the battle is always the Lord's. Arm yourself with knowledge. Be in the defense of liberty and not conquest. Defend your wives and your children and teach them now. And truth to power. Find your truth. Some other topics, if you're later interested in learning about, if you know about child or women trafficking or critical thinking or anything like that, some things we need to work on. As I said, any questions? We'll have the Q&A later, right? So if you have any questions later, my name is August. I hope God blesses you, and I hope God blesses the United States of America.
A little gift for August. Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, amen. That was wonderful. So his talk reminded me of the scripture that comes to mind is that about awakening to our awful situation. And I think that many of us are awakening to that now as we listen to news and we hear about the horrible things that are happening. And so there's this one scripture that comes to mind to me that helps me when I think of the awful situation we're in, which is that God promised, He said, in order to fulfill the promises that God made to the fathers, He says, I must needs destroy the secret works of darkness and abomination. And I love that verse. It's in 2 Nephi 10. And here's another one that when I first was starting to read books about last day stuff and the second coming, I was scared, like really scared. And this one helped me a lot. And this is in 2 Nephi, or 1 Nephi 22. God will not suffer that the wicked shall destroy the righteous. Wherefore He will preserve the righteous by His power, even if it so be that the fullness of His wrath must come, even to the destruction of their enemies by fire. Wherefore the righteous need not fear. So that's been a comfort. Our next speaker, Mark Skousen. Yes, love it. A little introduction. You guys already know the Skousen family. They're pretty prominent here in Utah. Mark is a proud husband and grandfather, an American economist, and author of more than 25 books on economics and finance. He currently teaches at Chapman University. Early in his career, he worked for the CIA, doing economic analysis, and he later became a columnist for many national publications. Mark is the founder and producer of Freedom Fest, which is a really awesome event. If you haven't been to that yet, I recommend it. One of the world's largest gatherings of free thinkers and advocates of liberty, which his wife Joanne helps bring to life each year. So let's give a round of applause.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. This gathering reminds me of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, who said that the remnant will bring us out of Babylon. And remember my friend Gary North, who had a newsletter called The Remnant Review. And he was always focusing on the remnant, that small number of people who really know what needs to be done to make a difference and make sure we preserve our liberties. And so coming together with these kinds of conferences is really important. I have some good news. After 45 years of writing my newsletter, Forecasts and Strategies, by Eagle Publishing, I started my newsletter, Forecasts and Strategies, the year the greatest president of the 20th century was elected. So what year did I start my newsletter? 1980, that's right, Ronald Reagan. So, but after 45 years of writing my newsletter, I've changed publishers. And my new publisher is the Oxford Club. So I went from Eagle, the editor of Eagle flew to Oxford to start a new newsletter, and that newsletter is called, figure this out, the Skousen Report. I left Eagle Publishing with the circulation of 7,500 subscribers around the country. In 1 month, I now have 40,000 subscribers. So was that a good move to a new publisher? Yeah, the Oxford Club are real pros. And I bring this up not to brag, but to say, in essence, the glory days are back, because I remember a time when I had 75,000 subscribers in the 90s. But because of the internet and CNBC and all of these other publications, there's so much free information out there that a lot of people don't subscribe to the newsletter. But my theme is a biblical one. Know the signs of the times. Know the signs of the times. And what I try to do as a professional economist is I try to be a good predictor, a good forecaster, and to offer good strategies to build your wealth and protect your wealth in these troubled times. So I went out on a high note. The headline of my last issue of Forecasts and Strategies is Dow 50,000, gold 5,000, silver $100. And guess what? They're all substantially below those prices. So I left on a high note, okay? So what was my prediction in my very first issue of the Skousen Report, which was written before the Trump administration decided to take on Iran? The financial shock of 2026. So I would like to think that over 45 years of writing my investment newsletter that I've survived and prospered and doing a better job. I pray every day to have the sense of what is going on in our country. And I'm sure many of you have that same prayer every morning. Now, do we have my PowerPoint up here? No. Or do I have a PowerPoint? Okay, so right here. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that would be really good. That would be very helpful. So the topic that Jake gave me to speak on is the importance of financial independence in troubled times. And I can't think of a better example of somebody who went through troubled times and ended up wealthy and wise than Ben Franklin. How Ben Franklin survived and prospered through 2 world wars, the French and Indian War and the American independence from Britain, runaway inflation, where they printed so much money that it was not worth a continental, a banking crisis that wiped out thousands of wealthy people, but not Ben Franklin. So he ended up, in fact, maybe this next slide would be interesting. I actually did a survey of these books and these lists of top 100 people, various categories. So I looked at Forbes America's top 250 historic innovators. That just came out last month. Then number 2 was this person. Okay, who you all know who that is now. World's top 100 greatest scientists. World's, not just American, world's. Listed number 25. World's 101 greatest philosophers worldwide came in number 93. And finally, the wealthy 100, history's richest people, ranked number 90. And of course, that person is Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin is definitely the person who deserves to be on the $100 bill. In fact, it would please his vanity to know he's worth 100 times more than the father of our country, George Washington, who's on the $1 bill. So Franklin is a really interesting person, and one that I think we can learn a lot from. So let's go our next slide here. So these are the turbulent times that Franklin faced. Imagine if you were in his situation, how well could you do? Okay. French and Indian War, War of American Independence, runaway inflation, the banking crisis, 1772. More than 20 banks in Britain failed within weeks due to the collapse of the East India Company stock. And we have also lived in those kind of circumstances. In 2008, in 2008, 2009, Ben Bernanke swore under oath that within 2 weeks, every major financial institution in the United States was about to go under. What kept that from happening? I teach money and banking at Chapman University and at Columbia University. And of course the answer is IL. And what does IL stand for? It's very easy to survive a financial crisis if you have someone with IL. So what is IL? Inject liquidity. Inject liquidity. And what did the Federal Reserve do? Increase the money supply dramatically. You had TARP, you had QE, quantitative easing, you had all kinds of methods that the government, and a lot of us thought there's no way that we're going to get out of this. We're going into a deflationary collapse. We're going into a second Great Depression. But somehow, once again, America survived. You know, despite every effort by Republicans and Democrats to overtax us and overregulate us, somehow the American dream is still alive. And my message to each one of you is that financial independence is really worth seeking. I'm thinking of Jacob too. Since Jake, where are you? Has he disappeared? So his full name is Jacob, so he would probably appreciate Jacob 2, which is a Jeremiah by the prophet Jacob. And he talks about wealth. And he says the number one goal is to keep God's commandments. And then you can seek wealth. And if you seek wealth, you must do it to do good, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to aid those who are in poverty. But he also lists, if you look at that verse in Jacob chapter 2, it also says, and liberate the captive. So he adds a patriotic theme. He said, yes, you should use your money not just for helping out those who need it, the needy, which Christian groups are very good at, certainly much better than the government. But it says, liberate the captive. Did any of you ever notice that in the Book of Mormon, for those of you who are Mormon? Very profound, I think. Next slide. So, Benjamin Franklin survived and prospered during all of those difficult times because he followed 3 grand principles that he taught. He actually practiced what he preached. How about that? How many times have you seen a pastor get up and preach virtue and so forth, then we find out he's involved in a scandal? Boy, that happens a lot. So Ben Franklin, though, was unique. He was able to follow these 3 principles. He actually practiced what he preached. Industry, thrift, and prudence. If you follow those three principles in life, you cannot help but be eminently successful in all ways, spiritually and materially. Industry. Are we all hard workers? Are we active? I know the term busy is, oh, I'm too busy to do X, right? Well, I never say that. If somebody says, oh, am I bothering you? Are you too busy? No, I'm active but never busy. It's a big difference. In fact, I remember I learned from a person who had a card. He said, he had his name, and underneath it, it said, always available. Always available. And he had his phone number. So he gave me his card and he says, you can call me at any time and I will answer the phone. I'm always available. So I like that, rather than the people who say, we can meet at 3:38 p.m. in the afternoon for 5 minutes. We have a lot of those. Okay. Industry. So we're all hardworking people. Anyone here who's lazy? Anybody want to admit they're lazy? I ask my students this, and I always get 1 or 2 students to raise their hand. Yeah, I'm lazy. They admit that they're lazy. But Americans are pretty hardworking. Do you know what the hardest working group is according to a survey? What country? Japan. A lot of people say Japan. No, this country says the Japanese are lazy. It's not India. It's not China. It is Korea. But Korea also has the highest suicide rate. They work a little too hard, okay? But they're number 1. You know what number 2 is? This will really shock you. You know what number 2 is? Mexicans. Mexicans come out as the second hardest working people. And I've hired a lot of them. Legals and illegals. It doesn't make any difference. They work, work, work. Pretty impressive. Okay. Second area is thrift. This is a hard one. Everybody's hardworking, but can you live within your means and save on a regular basis? Americans have very low savings rates. Japanese, Asian. You know the average Japanese has $100,000 in his bank account at the postal service there. Post office is where they keep their savings account. $100,000 on average. 60% of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck, right? They just do not have savings. We're changing that with 401k plans and all kinds of ways to encourage people to save. Extremely important. Every successful person I have ever met saves a lot of money. Okay, Donald Trump is an exception. He doesn't save any money. He finances everything by debt. Did you know that? Yes. Whether he's in the public or the private sector, it doesn't matter. He's a debt finance guy. So don't expect a balanced budget from Donald Trump. I know you have a lot of Trump supporters here, but I'm telling you, this is one campaign commitment he will not live up to. And he's already doing that. He wants to increase the defense budget, the war budget, from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. And he's using the money pretty fast. He's using it up. Okay, the third one is the most difficult of all, to learn the principles of prudence. What do we mean by prudence? We mean don't invest in something that is hard to, it's too hard to believe, right? We all are vulnerable to, we get dollar signs in our eyes when we see somebody saying, we can double and triple your money overnight. It's really difficult to live under those circumstances. So prudence is extremely difficult. Next slide. So I got some quotes. I'm a big fan of quotes. I have a book of quotes called The Maxims of Wall Street, and I do have copies available afterwards if you're interested in it. This book is not just a quote book, but also has a lot of stories that are really important, short stories. And everything is by category. So you might be interested in my book there, The Maxims of Wall Street, How to Become Financially Independent. But industry, look at all of the statements in Poor Richard's Almanac that Franklin came up as an example of hard work. The used key is always bright, never retire, always be active. There are 3 faithful friends in life. Now I've edited this because he actually said a faithful mistress was what his original term was. But we've changed it to the faithful wife, you see. An old dog and ready money. So how many of you have ready money? And this gets back to Jacob chapter 2. If you have the desire to become financially successful, I would hope you would use it to liberate the captive and engage in the freedom movement. And it's so sad how many billionaires are out there and they don't do that. And I have a lot of libertarian friends who do not believe in charitable work whatsoever. They will not give money to any cause. And I don't know what they're going to do when they die with all this money, but I guess they're going to send it to their kids and so forth. But use it for a good cause. So that's my view on that. Next slide. Thrift. A penny saved is a penny earned. I'm hoping that 100 years from now people will know what a penny is. Probably not. Inflation is taking its toll on the penny. I love this quote right here, which is one that could apply to Congress as well as us as private individuals. There's much revenue in economy. In other words, just making more money is not necessarily the solution. If you cut back on your expenditures, then a penny saved is a penny earned. And no revenue is sufficient without economy, because we do know millionaires and billionaires who have run into financial trouble because they didn't live within their means. They spent more than they should. Next slide. Prudence. These are just a couple of great quotes that I think are really valuable. In prosperous times, prosperous fortunes, be modest and wise. It is when you are in good times, that's when you need to start saving, that you can draw upon when the bad times come and an emergency expenditure comes. You need that savings. And companies that have retained earnings. Why is it that Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Starbucks, Google, have you looked how much cash they have on hand? It's billions. Warren Buffett has $300 billion in cash. Why? Because they were all caught with their pants down in 2008 and they didn't have enough cash. And their companies were threatened to bankruptcy. So this is why we're in much better financial shape than we've been in the past. I know there's a lot of fears. Certainly the federal government's in a bad position and is basically insolvent if you look at their unfunded liabilities. But private corporations are in really good shape, and you should be too. You need to retain earnings. And what are retained earnings? Savings. Ready cash. Really important. Next slide. So, how did Franklin survive and prosper? He avoided personal debt as much as possible. Being out of debt, my credit could not be shaken by any run against me. That was during the banking crisis. Okay. He had several sources of income, not just one. Royalties from his printing business, interest on loans, and bank accounts and rental properties. He had several rental properties in Philadelphia. He had bank accounts in 3 countries, benefiting from compound interest. He owned several rental properties in Philadelphia, giving him positive cash flow. And he carefully loaned out funds to friends and business partners. Really brilliant strategy. And then on top of it, he used his money for good purposes. In 1774, he was making 1,800 pounds a year, which made him one of the richest people in London at the time. And overnight, he lost it all. He was fired as the colonial agent because of a personal crisis. He was fired. And How do you survive that? Well, because he had retained earnings. In the good times, he saved his money. It's in the good times is when you start spending your money. This is your mistake. And even as businesses, the competitors are all spending a lot of money. That encourages you to spend a lot of money. And even to go into debt. Big mistake. You need to have prudence during those good times. So if you're making good money, that's when you need to save, not when you go out and spend more. You have to do just the opposite of what most people do. Next slide. More importantly, it's so important to be an optimist. In today's world, you turn on the news and almost everybody is criticizing, whether it's criticizing Donald Trump, it's criticizing the Democrats, it's criticizing the rhinos, you're criticizing you just make a list, right? You're going to hear a lot of criticism at this conference, and so it's hard to be optimistic when you see that. But Franklin was an optimist. He tried to look at the positive sides of things. Let's go to the next slide. I'll tell you, living the good life. This is kind of fun. He was very much. He says he loves life. We must not blame Providence inconsiderately, for there are many more pleasures than the negatives. And he had the gout, and he had the kidney stone, extreme pain, but he lived to 84. And everybody liked him. Everybody loved to be around him because he was very positive in life. And how did he deal with enemies? For example, he had in the Pennsylvania legislature, one of the top people was against him, was his enemy. And he decided to go to him and say, hey, I saw that I've been hearing that you have a particular book in your library. Do you mind if I borrow that book from you? And as a result, they became best friends. This is how he dealt with this sort of thing. I got to show you the one on channeling, President Trump channeling Ben Franklin. Let's go next slide. No, I thought I had it in there. Maybe I don't. Okay, let's go back. I don't have that. But President Trump brought in Ben Franklin's the Houdon bust, which is a famous bust that was done in Franklin's lifetime. And he brought it into the White House. And I would like to think that he was channeling Ben Franklin, who is considered by Ken Burns and many other historians as the greatest diplomat in history. And let me give you an example of how good he was. Okay, at the age of 70, Ben Franklin went to France, to Paris, France, to be America's ambassador and to get the French to raise money and to declare war against England and to send ammunitions and so forth to America. And he was extremely good in this. In fact, they sent over 5 commissioners to make sure that Ben Franklin was doing his job, because he was 70 years old. They didn't trust him. John Adams and Abigail Adams were over there, and they thought he was a womanizer and a renegade and a heretic and a non-believer, and they hated the French. But Ben Franklin loved the French, and the French loved him. And they got on so well that Franklin raised all the money. None of the other 5 commissioners raised a single livre, which was the currency at the time. Not a single one. But at the Battle of Yorktown that won the American Revolution, half the troops were French. All the uniforms were French. All the ships that were bombarding the British were French. Who won that war? The Americans won that war because of the help of the French. And who was responsible for getting the French to support our cause? Ben Franklin was the only one. But Congress still wanted more money. Robert Morris from the committee in Congress sent a letter to Ben Franklin and said, listen, we need another 25 million livres, and if we don't get it, we're going to go under. Franklin wrote back and he said, I'm exhausted. You've got to be kidding. I've raised a huge amount of money, and we know we can't even pay it back. And you're expecting me to ask for 25 million livres? I won't do it. Robert Morris writes back again. He says, you have to do it because without it, we lose the war. So Franklin, in his best diplomatic skills, writes a letter to Vergennes, the foreign minister, and says, listen, I'm sorry to ask you, but we need 25 million livres. And if you don't give us this money, imagine what's going to happen for our next 100 years. The British are going to win, and they're going to dominate over the next 100 years against you and the French. So we need this money desperately. Sends the letter off, and a week later, here's nothing. Another week goes by. Here's nothing. Finally, he writes another letter to Vergennes. Did you get my email? And Vergennes writes back and says, come to Versailles, we'll talk. So, immediately, Ben Franklin gets into his carriage and goes down to Versailles. He walks in. Vergennes has this very glum look on his face. Says, Dr. Franklin, have a seat. And then he says, I'm sorry, Dr. Franklin. We know that you're broke. We know that you can't pay the interest, let alone the principal on all the debt that you have loaded upon us. And let me tell you something else, Dr. Franklin. We're broke too. We, the French, have no money. We have a famine going on. We have problems with feeding our own people. And they're rioting. So I'm sorry, Dr. Franklin. We cannot loan you 25 million livres. And then he paused. And he said, but because of the love you have for the French people, and because the King of France loves you, the King has decided to give you, not as a loan, but as a gift, out of his own pocket, his own funding, 6 million livres. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call fundraising. He was the greatest fundraiser ever, and we can learn a lot from Ben Franklin. So I've written a book called The Greatest American, the World's Most Versatile Genius. I came up with 22 careers. Now, this is not a standard biography. You've probably read, there's plenty of biographies of Ben Franklin. These are 80 chapters on how to apply Franklin's life and lessons to today's hot issues. In business, investing, in fundraising, in patriotism, war. I've got chapters in here. There's one. This represented a column I wrote for 6 years for Newsmax magazine, and one column was rejected. I said, "I'm sorry, this topic is too racy for us to publish in the Newsmax publication." So, what do you think the topic was? Nobody knows. Franklin's notoriously known as a ladies' man, or what you might call a womanizer, to be charitable. And so the chapter on his hard to govern passions was censored, not published. Chapter 77 of my book, for anybody who's interested. So anyway, I do have some copies of my book over here, as well as the Maxims of Wall Street, if you're interested in financial independence. Those two are available, and both have sold quite a bit, just $20 each. Finally, I just wanted to mention my Freedom Fest conference. The World's Fair of Liberty is what we're calling this year. As you can see, we have John Mackey of Whole Foods, Steve Forbes are going to be there, Kennedy is our MC from Fox News. Next slide. So these are some of our speakers. We have Rob Schneider, actor and comedian. Kennedy is our MC, Adam Carolla, John Mackey, Michael Shermer, Skeptic Magazine, Steve Forbes. Next slide. And a couple of Supermen. Dean Cain, Superman and Lois and Clark, and the super economist. Not sure who that is. So anyway, if you're interested, my younger brother Neil has passed around a card to give you information, and if you use the code, if you want to write this down, Oxford, my newsletter, Oxford 100, you get $100 off. And it would just be great to see a caravan of Liberty United people. I know Jake has been a big fan and come. How many have been to Freedom Fest, just by show of hands? So a number of you have been there, and it is a lot of fun. No one is ever bored at Freedom Fest, because we have 10 breakout sessions. We have big name speakers. We think Senator Rand Paul and his wife Kelly are planning to come. We're inviting Mike Lee as well, and Thomas Massey, who is probably the most controversial. Thomas Massey is probably going to come as well. We're in negotiations with him. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming, and I look forward to talking to you over there.
Thank you, Mark. It's a real gift. Wonderful. Thank you for your words, Mark.
I've networked with Sheriff Mack. I was gonna say Freedom Fest is really something you're gonna want to attend. And Mark's not paying me. He should give me free entry for how much I promote Freedom Fest for him. All in favor, say aye. Aye. There you have it, Mark. I get free access. No, really, I don't get paid. It just really is a spectacular place to network. Who came out on 9/11, 2021 when we did the big event in the park with Alma Ekpanobi? Who was there? Who came to the conference in Draper where we brought her out to that one as well? So we've brought in some special guests with Liberty United, and I've connected with all of them at Freedom Fest. So instead of them hiding in like a green room, Mark pushes them out into the exhibitor hall and forces them to talk to people. It's just a really excellent networking opportunity. Anyway, I just want to say it's really good.
Yeah, I second that. I met amazing people, like all your favorite people you follow. I met Jake there, but other famous people that you follow, I just met them all. They're accessible in the exhibit hall. You can take pictures with them. It was amazing, wonderful time. So Mark's talk reminded me of the scripture about when you give, it'll be given to you, and how I love how he talked about being generous, and as we're generous, then God will give back to us in full measure. And so I don't think there's any way that you can, definitely as you give, you're blessed. Savior, Redeemer of my soul, whose mighty hand hath made me whole, whose wondrous power hath raised me up, and filled mine sweet bitter cup. What tongue my gratitude can tell? Oh, gracious God.